On the wind-scoured plains of Virelia, a planet where twin suns baked the rust-red soil by day and ghostly auroras danced across the violet sky by night, lived a man named Joran Vale. He wasn't a soldier, not anymore. Once, he'd piloted a coalition frigate through the Krell Nebula skirmishes, but that life had burned away with his ship and half his left arm. Now, he ran a salvage depot near the edge of the shattered basin, trading scrap metal for synthrice and silence. Silence was rare in the galaxy, but out here, among the whispering canyons and crumbling alien ruins older than human history, it clung to him like a second skin. Then came the storm. Not a sandstorm, though those were frequent, but a storm of fate. It arrived in the form of a tiny, trembling figure half-buried in the wreckage of a downed scout pod. White skin pale as moonstone, hair like spun frost matted with ash, eyes the color of liquid emerald, wide with terror and wonder. She couldn't have been more than 6 Virelian cycles old, roughly 8 Earth years, and wore a tattered tunic stitched with glyphs Joran didn't recognize. No ID chip, no distress beacon, just a child, alone in a graveyard of metal and memory. He called her Lysara. At first she barely spoke. She'd flinch at loud noises, hide behind the coolant tanks when the salvage drones whirred to life, and stare at the twin suns as if expecting them to fall. But slowly, trust bloomed like the night-blooming silver bells that only opened under the auroras. Joran taught her how to weld a cracked conduit. She taught him how to hum the lullabies of her people, melodies that shimmered like starlight on water. He gave her a cot beside his bunk. She gave him back something he thought war had stolen forever: purpose. Years passed. Lysara grew tall and graceful, her white hair now braided with copper wire she'd salvaged herself, her eyes sharp with curiosity. She learned to fix plasma relays, navigate asteroid fields on the depot's old sim rig, and cook synth stew with a dash of desert time that made even the ration cubes taste like feasts. The locals, mostly ex-miners, smugglers, and retired mercenaries, called her Ghost Child, but never to her face. To them, she was Joran's daughter. To Joran, she was everything. He never asked where she came from. Some wounds, he figured, healed best in silence. Until the sky split open. It began with a tremor. Not in the ground, but in the air itself. A low, resonant hum that made the salvage drones power down and the canyon walls vibrate. Joran stepped outside, squinting against the twin suns, and froze. Above the basin, 10 colossal warships hung in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian, etched with spiraling sigils that pulsed with soft gold light. Each vessel was larger than a city block, bristling with weapons that could glass a continent. The Virelian wind died. Even the auroras seemed to hold their breath. A single shuttle detached from the lead ship, descending with impossible grace. It landed without a sound in the depot's courtyard, kicking up not a single grain of dust. The ramp lowered. Out stepped a woman. She was tall, taller than any human Joran had ever seen, with the same white skin and white hair as Lysara. But where Lysara's eyes held warmth, this woman's burned with cold authority. She wore armor of interwoven gold and jade, shaped like living vines, and at her hip hung a blade that shimmered like captured lightning. Behind her marched a dozen armored guards, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors, moving in eerie unison. Lysara stood in the doorway, trembling, not with fear, but recognition. "Mother," she whispered. The woman's gaze softened for half a heartbeat before hardening again. "Lysara of House Vale," she said, her voice like wind through crystal chimes. "You have been absent from the celestial accord for 17 cycles. Your betrothal was forfeit, your lineage unclaimed." She turned to Joran, eyes narrowing. "And you, mud dweller, scrap thief, dared to raise my heir without consent?" Joran stepped forward, his prosthetic arm whirring softly. "I didn't raise an heir. I raised a child." A murmur rippled through the guards. The woman, Queen Vale, though Joran didn't know her title yet, studied him as if he were a curious insect. Then, to everyone's shock, she smiled. Not a cruel smile, but one laced with something ancient and weary. "You kept her alive when the Void Corsairs hunted her pod," she said. "You taught her compassion when our courts teach only duty. You gave her a name when she had none." She reached into her robe and withdrew a crystalline scroll that glowed faintly. "For that, there is a price." She unfurled the scroll. Inside, etched in light, were 2 names: Lysara Vale and Joran Vale. Beneath them, intricate symbols swirled into the shape of a double helix. Virelian 4, bonded for life. "Wedding papers," Joran choked out. "Not for her, Queen Vale said, her eyes locking onto his. For you. Silence crashed down like a collapsing star. Lysara gasped. Mother, what are you doing? The accord demands balance, the Queen replied coolly. You were raised by a human. To reclaim your place among the celestial houses, your guardian must become your kin by law and by blood oath. If he refuses, you return to the Spire of Silence, where your memories of this place will be cleansed. If he accepts. She paused, and for the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt? Hope? Then House Vale gains an unexpected ally. And you, Joran Vale, gain a family larger than you ever imagined. Joran's mind reeled. Marriage? To an alien queen? He was a broken-down salvager with a cybernetic arm and a fondness for burnt synth coffee. This was madness. But then he looked at Lysara, her eyes wide, her hands clenched, her entire future hanging in the balance, and he knew. He'd faced plasma storms, pirate fleets, and the crushing void of deep space. But nothing terrified him more than losing her. I accept, he said. The Queen nodded, as if she'd expected nothing less. Then prepare. The bonding ceremony occurs at the next aurora. Fail to appear, and the fleets will reduce this basin to glass. As the shuttle lifted off, Lysara ran to him, tears streaking her white cheeks. You don't have to do this. I'll go with her. I'll forget you if I must. Joran knelt, placing his human hand on her shoulder, his prosthetic one gently brushing her hair. Listen to me, ghost child. You think I'm doing this for your mother? No. I'm doing it because you deserve both worlds, your past and your future. And if marrying a terrifyingly beautiful alien queen is the price. He grinned, though his heart hammered like a dying engine. Well, I've had worse Tuesdays. She laughed through her tears, a sound like bells in a quiet temple. But the real storm was just beginning. Over the next hours, the depot became a whirlwind of activity. Verilian attendants materialized from nowhere, draping the rusted gantries in luminous silk, filling the air with the scent of star blossoms, and installing holographic shrines that hummed with ancestral chants. Joran was scrubbed, oiled, and fitted into a ceremonial robe woven from light fiber that changed color with his mood, currently a nervous shade of burnt orange. Meanwhile, Lysara was taken to the Queen's flagship for preparation. Joran watched the shuttle ascend, his stomach twisting. He trusted the Queen somewhat, but galactic politics were a labyrinth with teeth. Then, as the first aurora ribbons began to streak the sky, a coded message crackled over his old comms unit. A frequency only one person knew. Asterisk Joran. It's a trap. Asterisk. The voice was rough, familiar. Captain Relic, his old wingmate from the Nebula Wars, now a freelance spy with more scars than credits. Asterisk. The Queen's not here for Lysara. She's fleeing a coup. Her brother, Lord Zareth, controls 7 of those 10 fleets. He wants Lysara dead to claim the throne. The wedding? It's a shield. If you bond with the Queen, your human status grants her diplomatic immunity under coalition law. But if Zareth finds out... Asterisk. The transmission cut out. Joran's blood ran cold. He looked up. The auroras blazed brighter, casting the basin in ethereal green light. The Queen stood at the edge of the courtyard, resplendent in her armor, holding the glowing scroll. Lysara stood beside her, dressed in robes of silver and pearl, her eyes searching for him. He had minutes to decide. Walk away and save himself, or step into a galactic powder keg with nothing but love and a rusty old plasma pistol hidden in his robe. He took a deep breath, adjusted his collar, and walked forward. Let the stars bear witness. He wasn't just a salvager anymore. He was family. And family, even the weird, alien, fleet-commanding kind, was worth fighting for. As he approached the dais, the ground trembled. Not from ships, but from something deeper. The ruins around the basin began to glow, ancient glyphs flaring to life. The Queen's eyes widened. The heart of Virilia awakens, she whispered. It recognizes the bond. Before Joran could ask what that meant, the sky above them fractured again. Not with ships, but with fire. 3 warships peeled away from the formation, their hulls branded with a jagged crimson sigil. Zareth's mark. They're here, Lysara breathed. The Queen turned to Joran, her voice urgent. The ceremony must finish before they land. Only a completed bond can activate the planet's defense matrix. Joran nodded, heart pounding. Then let's get married. As the first plasma bolts seared through the atmosphere, the 3 of them clasped hands beneath the auroras. Human, Queen, and child. while the ancient planet hummed beneath their feet, ready to rise. And somewhere in the chaos, Joran realized something absurd. He'd forgotten to ask if the Queen even liked synth coffee. The plasma bolt struck the eastern ridge, sending a plume of molten rock skyward like a geyser of fire. Shrapnel rained down, hissing as it hit the cooling soil. Around them, the Virelian attendants scattered, their luminous silks flapping like startled birds. But Joran didn't flinch. He tightened his grip on Lysara's hand with his flesh and bone one, and on the Queen's with his prosthetic, its servos whining softly under strain. The bonding ritual began not with vows, but with resonance. Queen Vale raised her free hand, and the crystalline scroll floated between them, spinning slowly. The glyphs on its surface detached, swirling like fireflies, then plunged into their chests. Joran gasped. It didn't hurt, exactly. It felt like every memory he'd ever had was being gently untangled and woven into something new. He saw Lysara as a baby, wrapped in scorched cloth. He saw the Queen weeping over an empty cradle. He saw a council chamber bathed in blood-red light, a figure with the same white hair but crueler eyes, Lord Zareth, declaring the child unfit to inherit. And then he saw her. The Queen, not as a regal stranger, but as Naylis, her true name, whispered only in dreams and deathbeds. Naylis, who'd sent her daughter away in a stealth pod when the coup began, hoping the void would hide her better than any fortress. Naylis, who'd spent 17 cycles hunting rumors across 1,000 worlds, following whispers of a ghost child, raised by a human on a backwater rock. The scroll flared white-hot. Above, Zareth's warships descended like vultures, their weapon ports glowing. One fired again, this time at the dais. But the ground erupted. From the ancient ruins, pillars of light shot upward, forming a shimmering dome over the courtyard. The heart of Virelia, the planet's dormant defense matrix, had awakened. It recognized the bond. It recognized family. Inside the shield, time seemed to slow. Naylis turned to Joran, her emerald eyes wide with something he hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. The bond is incomplete, she said urgently. It needs truth, not just memory choice. You must say it. Out loud. Say what? Joran asked, heart hammering. That you accept me, not as queen, not as strategy, but as yours. Lysara squeezed his hand. She's scared, Joran. Like I was when you found me. He looked at Naylis, really looked, past the armor, past the regal bearing, to the woman beneath. Exhausted, grieving, fiercely loving. He thought of all the nights he'd stayed up listening to Lysara's nightmares, how he'd patched her scraped knees and taught her to curse in 3 languages when the synth rice burned. He thought of how, just last week, she'd braided wild silver bells into his hair, for luck. This wasn't just politics. This was home. I choose you, Naylis, he said, voice rough but clear. Not your throne, not your fleets. You, and Lysara. Always Lysara. The scroll shattered, not into pieces but into light. It poured into them, binding them in a trinity of pulse and breath. The dome around them blazed gold. The planet sang, a deep, harmonic hum that vibrated in Joran's bones. Outside, Zareth's flagship shuddered as if struck by an invisible fist. Alarms blared across the fleet. The defense matrix wasn't just shielding them. It was repelling the invaders, using the planet's magnetic core like a cosmic slingshot. But Zareth wasn't done. His voice boomed from every speaker, every comms unit, even the wind itself. A psychic broadcast, raw and furious. Sister, you defile our bloodline with a mud-born. The Accord will never accept this mongrel union. Naylis stepped forward, her armor now glowing with the same gold light as the dome. The Accord is dead, brother. I am the Accord now. Then came the twist no one expected. Lysara stepped between them, her small frame trembling, but her voice steady. Uncle Zareth, she called out, loud enough for the fleet to hear. You say I'm unfit, but I've lived among humans. I've learned their kindness, their stubborn hope. And I've seen what you did, burning the nurseries on Cathis, poisoning the water on Solran Prime. You don't want the throne. You want to break it. Silence. Even the Auroras paused. Then, from one of the other 7 ships, those still loyal to the Queen, a new voice crackled over the comms. House Vale stands with the heir. Then another, and House Tlorn. And another, House Mira. One by one, the remaining fleet captains declared allegiance, not to Naylis alone but to Lysara. Zareth roared in fury. His ship charged, weapons primed for a suicide run. But Joran had an idea. Naylis, can the Matrix grab things? She blinked. It can manipulate gravitational fields. Why? Because I've got 10 years of scrap piled behind Hangar 3, and I know exactly how to turn junk into a trap. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. Do it. While Naylis and Lasara held the bond light steady, Joran sprinted to his depot. He bypassed the safety locks, rerouted power from the coolant tanks, and activated the old magnetic crane, the one he used to lift wrecked engines. With a roar, it swung upward, dragging a mountain of twisted metal, broken thrusters, and unstable plasma cells. Zaratha's ship barreled toward the dome. Joran waited, counted, then slammed the override. The crane hurled the scrap like a cosmic slingshot. The debris didn't hit the ship, surrounded it, and because every piece was laced with residual magnetic charge from Virelia's core, the junk clung to the hull like iron filings to a magnet. The ship's systems shorted. Engines died. Weapons fizzled. Zaratha's vessel hung in the air, helpless, wrapped in the very refuse Joran had spent a decade collecting. The Loyalist fleets moved in, tractor beams locking on. But before they could take him, Zarath did the unthinkable. He triggered the ship's self-destruct. No! Lasara screamed. The explosion would vaporize half the basin. But Naylis acted faster. She thrust her hands into the air, and the dome expanded, swallowing the blast like a star swallowing a comet. The light flared blinding white, then collapsed inward, compressing the explosion into a single, dense sphere of contained energy. When the light faded, Zaratha's ship was gone. In its place hovered a perfect, humming orb of captured plasma, now part of the planet's core. Silence returned. Then, one by one, the Loyalist ships lowered their weapons. The coup was over. Exhausted, Joran sank to his knees. Naylis knelt beside him, her armor dimming. Lasara threw her arms around them both. You did it, she whispered. We did it, Joran corrected, smiling. But the story wasn't over. Days later, as the fleets began repairs and the ruins settled back into quiet, Joran stood with Naylis on the edge of the basin, watching the twin suns set. Lasara was inside, arguing with a Virelian engineer about how to retrofit a plasma rifle with a coffee warmer. It's practical. Naylis leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. You never asked what happens now. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready. She smiled. The Celestial Accord will convene. There will be trials, debates, probably a few ceremonial duels. But Lasara is safe. And you? She turned, her emerald eyes searching his. You are my bonded, my equal, my husband, by your world's terms. Joran chuckled. I still don't know if you like synth coffee. I hate it, she said deadpan. But I'll drink it if you make it. He laughed. A real, full laugh that echoed across the canyon. Then she grew serious. There's something else. The bond, it's more than legal. It's biological. Our lifespans will now align. You'll live as long as I do. Centuries, perhaps. Joran went still. Centuries? Yes, unless... She hesitated. Unless you reject the full bond. I can sever the longevity link. You'd live a human life. Grow old. Die. He looked at her, really looked. At the woman who'd crossed galaxies for her child. At the warrior who'd faced down a fleet for love. At the queen who'd chosen vulnerability over power. Then he thought of Lasara growing up without him. Of missing her first command, her wedding, her children. No, he said softly. I'm not leaving either of you. Not for anything. Tears welled in Naylis's eyes, real, human-like tears. Then welcome to forever, Joran Vale. Inside, Lasara burst out the door, waving a wrench. Joran, I got the coffee warmer to work. It also toasts bread. And maybe launches small missiles? We should test it. He grinned. Only if your mother says it's safe. Naylis sighed, but her smile was bright. Let them test it. What's one more explosion? And as the auroras began to dance once more, painting the sky in colors no human tongue could name, the three of them stood together. Not as salvager, queen, and orphan, but as family. Strange, imperfect, unbreakable, and just getting started. Weeks passed, and Virelia transformed. What had once been a lonely salvage outpost now bustled with life. Virelian engineers, diplomats, and scholars arrived in steady streams, not as conquerors but as builders. They didn't tear down Joran's depot, they wove it into something new. The rusted gantries became scaffolding for crystalline arboretums. The coolant tanks were repurposed into aquaponic gardens that bloomed with bioluminescent flora. Even the old sim rig was upgraded into a training pod for young pilots, Lasara's idea, of course. Joran, once a man who spoke only in grunts and grease stains, now walked corridors lined with living murals that shifted with his mood. He still wore his old boots, though scuffed, oil-stained, stubbornly human. Nahlis ruled from the basin now, not the spire. She declared it the new seat of House Vale, a symbol that power could grow from dust if tended with care. Her council chamber was a repurposed cargo bay, its walls hung with salvaged star charts and Lasara's childhood drawings. "That one's you fighting a space kraken," Lasara had said proudly, pointing to a crayon scribble. Nahlis kept it above her throne. But peace, even hard-won peace, is never still. Rumors slithered in from the outer sectors. Whispers of a splinter faction, loyalists to Zaratha's ideology, who called the new Trinity the Mudblood regime. They sabotaged supply lines, hacked diplomatic beacons, spread propaganda claiming Joran was using alien tech to control the Queen's mind. Then came the first assassination attempt. It happened during the Feast of Twin Moons, a Varelian tradition where families shared memory tea beneath the sky. Joran was laughing at something Lasara said. Something about teaching the palace guards to play poker, when a flicker of distortion rippled through the air beside Nahlis. A cloaked figure materialized, blade raised. Joran moved before he thought. His prosthetic arm shot out, intercepting the strike with a shower of sparks. The blade, a neural disruptor, sizzled against his reinforced plating. He tackled the assassin, rolling them into the dirt, and pinned them with a knee to the chest. The hood fell back. Not a soldier, not even Varelian, a human, young, terrified, with coalition insignia half-scrubbed from their sleeve. "You don't understand," the assassin gasped. "She's destabilizing the quadrant." The Accord kept the peace. Joran's blood ran cold. "The coalition sent you?" Before the youth could answer, Nahlis was there, her hand glowing with restrained energy. But she didn't strike. Instead, she knelt. "You were lied to," she said gently. "The peace you knew was built on silence, on children like Lasara being erased. We're not destroying order, we're making it just." The assassin trembled, then wept. "They took them prisoner, not to a cell but to the gardens, where elders would speak with them, not punish them. Ideas," Nahlis told Joran later, "are harder to kill than people. Better to heal the mind than silence it." But the incident left a mark. That night, Joran couldn't sleep. He wandered to the edge of the basin, where the ruins still hummed faintly with the heart's energy. Lasara found him there. "You're scared," she said, not a question. "Terrified," he admitted. "I thought saving you from pirates was hard. But this? Politics. War. Being someone's husband." He laughed weakly. "I barely knew how to fold laundry before you." She sat beside him, her white hair catching the starlight. "You think Mother knew how to be a queen when she started? She told me once she cried for 3 days after her coronation because she couldn't figure out how to wear the crown without it slipping." Joran snorted. "Really? Really?" And then she melted it down and made it into a hairpin. Lasara grinned. "She's not perfect, Joran. None of us are. But we're together. That's what scares them, the ones who sent that kid. They can't break a family that chooses each other, again and again." He looked at her. This girl who'd grown into a force of nature, and felt something settle in his chest. Not fear. Not anymore. Hope. The next morning, Joran did something unprecedented. He requested an audience with the Celestial Accord, not as Nahlis's consort, but as himself. When the holographic envoys flickered to life in the council chamber, elders from a dozen species, their forms ranging from crystalline entities to floating gas bags, Joran stood in his old salvage coveralls, boots squeaking on the polished floor. "I'm not here to plead," he began, voice steady. "I'm here to invite." He explained the depot's transformation, showed them schematics of the new academy, where human and Varelian children would learn side by side, proposed a joint fleet not for war, but for disaster response, using salvage tech to rebuild worlds scarred by conflict. "And if you're worried about mudblood corruption," he added, a spark of his old humor returning, "don't. My coffee's still terrible, but I'm working on it." To everyone's shock, the Accord agreed. Not all of them, but enough. The first joint mission launched a month later. A derelict colony on Xylos Prime, ravaged by solar flares. Joran piloted the lead ship, a refitted Varelian cruiser he'd nicknamed the Rust Bucket. Nahlis coordinated from orbit. Lysara led the ground team, her wrench now upgraded with a med scanner and a surprisingly effective sonic spanner. They saved 12,000 lives. Back on Virilia, celebrations lasted for days. Fireworks made of condensed aurora light painted the sky. Lysara danced with engineers. Nahlis toasted Joran with real earth whiskey, smuggled by Relic, who'd shown up unannounced with a crate of tools and a black eye. "You're a pain in my exhaust port, Vale," Relic grumbled, clinking glasses. "But I've never been prouder." Then came the final twist, quiet, but seismic. One evening, as Joran and Nahlis walked through the gardens, she stopped beneath a silverbell tree. Its blossoms glowed softly, responding to their presence. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said, her voice uncharacteristically shy. "The bond, it doesn't just share lifespan." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh, it also allows for new life." Joran froze. "You mean?" She placed a hand on her abdomen. "Yes, in about 8 Virilian cycles. We're going to have another child." For a long moment he couldn't speak. Then, slowly, he sank to his knees, pressing his forehead to her stomach, tears soaking into the fabric of her robe. Lysara found them like that, Joran weeping, Nahlis stroking his hair, and didn't say a word. She just sat beside them, humming the old lullaby, as the auroras swirled above. The galaxy was still dangerous. Factions still schemed. Wars still simmered at the edges. But here, in this basin of rust and light, something new was growing. Not just a child. The future. And Joran Vale, salvager, soldier, father, husband, would be damned if he let anyone take it away. Years flowed like twin rivers across the red plains of Virilia, sometimes calm, sometimes storm-swollen, but always moving forward. The basin, once a graveyard of forgotten machines, had become the beating heart of a new era. The Academy of Shared Skies rose where the salvage depot once stood, its towers grown from living crystal and recycled starship hulls, its halls echoing with the laughter of human and Virilian children learning side by side. At its center stood a statue, not of a warrior or a queen, but of a man with a prosthetic arm, a white-haired girl perched on his shoulders, and a queen beside them, her hand resting gently on his back. It was titled simply, Family. Joran never stopped wearing his old boots, but now they trod corridors lined with star maps drawn by students, and gardens where silverbells bloomed year-round thanks to Lysara's tinkering. He taught engineering, though his lessons often devolved into impromptu stories about the great plasma toaster incident of Cycle 42, which the children never tired of hearing. Nahlis ruled with a quiet strength, her council now a mosaic of species and ideologies, all bound by one principle: no child would ever be abandoned again. Lysara, now a young woman with her mother's grace and Joran's stubborn grin, became the first commander of the Unity Fleet, a peacekeeping armada crewed equally by humans and Virilians. Her first mission? Escorting refugee ships from war-torn systems to safe harbor on Virilia. She flew a ship she'd rebuilt herself, named Ghostchild's Promise, its hull etched with salvaged glyphs and a tiny coffee warmer module bolted near the cockpit. "For emergencies," she insisted. The child Nahlis carried was born beneath the auroras, just as the first had been. They named her Kira, light in an old Earth dialect Joran's grandmother had spoken. She had Nahlis's emerald eyes, Joran's crooked smile, and a laugh that made the silver bells chime in harmony. From the moment she could crawl, she followed Lysara around like a tiny shadow, begging to fix the stars with her big sister. The final threat came not with warships, but with silence. A plague of neural decay swept through the outer colonies, spreading not through air or water, but through corrupted data streams, erasing memories, identities, love itself. Entire worlds forgot their own names. The Unity Fleet scrambled to contain it, but the source was elusive, hidden in the ruins of a dead AI civilization. It was Kira, barely 5 cycles old, who found the answer. While playing near the heart of Virilia, the ancient planetary core that still hummed with the resonance of their bond. She hummed a lullaby Joran had once sung to her. The ruins responded, not with weapons but with song. The planet's harmonic frequency, amplified by the bond between Joran, Nahlis, and Lysara, created a counterwave, a melody of memory and connection that purged the corruption wherever it touched. The plague ended not with a battle, but with a symphony. In the aftermath, the celestial accord dissolved not in ruin but in evolution. In its place rose the concord of kinship, a union not of treaties, but of shared stories, shared children, shared coffee, now famously brewed by Joran, who'd finally mastered the art, though he still added a splash of synth for nostalgia. On the day Kira turned 10, the family stood once more on the edge of the basin, watching the twin suns dip below the horizon. Lasara had returned from a long mission, her hair now streaked with copper from solar winds, her eyes tired but bright. She held the hand of a kind-eyed Virilian engineer named Taylen, whom she'd met while repairing a derelict habitat ring and, much to Joran's mock horror, had already proposed to using a salvaged plasma coil shaped like a ring. Naelis leaned into Joran, her white hair silvered further by time, her armor replaced by simple robes woven with threads of aurora light. "We did well," she murmured. "We're still doing," he corrected, squeezing her hand. And they were. Their home was no longer just a planet. It was a promise, carried on ships, sung in classrooms, whispered in lullabies across 1,000 worlds. A promise that love could cross species, that orphans could become heirs, that broken men could become fathers, and that even the loneliest salvage yard could bloom into a cradle of peace. As the first stars appeared, Kira ran to them, breathless, holding a glowing silver bell. "Look, it bloomed just for us." Joran lifted her onto his shoulders, just like in the statue, and together, the four of them stood beneath the endless sky, whole, happy, and finally, gloriously at peace. Years settled like stardust over Virilia, softening edges but never dimming the light. The salvage depot was gone, replaced by the Academy of Shared Skies, where human and Virilian children learned to weld starships and write poetry in the same breath. Joran still wore his old boots, though now they trod halls lined with murals of their family's journey. Naelis ruled not from a distant spire, but from a sunlit chamber filled with Lasara's childhood drawings and the scent of real coffee, finally perfected after decades of trial, error, and one memorable kitchen explosion. Lasara commanded the Unity fleet with grace and grit, her ship Ghostchild's promise a beacon of hope across the quadrant. She married Taylen beneath the auroras, their vows sealed with a ring forged from a salvaged plasma coil and a single silver bell. Their daughter, Mira, would one day pilot her own ship, but for now, she chased Kira through the gardens, both girls laughing as the blossoms chimed in delight. Kira, bright-eyed and curious, inherited her father's stubbornness and her mother's quiet wisdom. She spoke to the heart of Virilia like it was an old friend, and sometimes the planet whispered back. When the memory plague threatened the outer worlds, it was her lullaby, sung in Joran's rough earth dialect, that awakened the planet's healing song. Peace didn't mean the end of struggle, but it meant they faced it together. Pirates turned diplomats, enemies became neighbors, and every evening, without fail, the four of them gathered on the terrace, Joran, Naelis, Lasara, and Kira, to watch the twin suns set and the auroras rise. No fleets loomed on the horizon. No wedding papers demanded sacrifice. Only love, earned and chosen, day after day. And as the stars blinked awake above the rust-red plains, Joran Vale, salvager, soldier, husband, father, knew he'd found the rarest thing in the galaxy. A home that never let go.